April 15th, 2014. It was Bermuda Shorts Day at the University of Calgary. Go! Bermuda Shorts Day is an annual celebration of the end of the school year. It's basically just a giant party on the campus parking lot full of thousands of drunk students, live music, food, and it's just a chance for everyone to unwind. It's a celebration that happens every year, and 2014 was just another one of those years. So I don't think anyone had any idea what was about to happen. Hi guys, my name is Inferna and this is my first ever true crime video. I've been wanting to do true crime for the longest time now. So I thought I'd start off with a case that really hits close to home, and the reason being is because Matthew Grood was actually a student at the same university that I went to. At one point we were studying at that university at the same time. Like, he had just finished his 4th year when I had just finished my 1st year. I never knew him personally, and I'd never heard of him before this case happened, but you know, like, university just has such a community atmosphere to it, so whenever something big happens, everyone's bound to hear about it and, you know, almost sort of be affected by it. So yeah, needless to say, when it happened, it was a really big thing. It was the only thing that people were talking about for weeks and weeks, not only at university, but just the city of Calgary altogether. So at the time of this case, Matthew Grood was a 22-year-old student. He had just finished his psychology degree back in 2013, a year ago, and he was now due to start law school at the University of Calgary the upcoming fall in 2014. And the University of Calgary's law school is definitely one of the tougher law schools to get into in Canada. Like, I've had several friends who've tried getting in, and yeah, it's just tough. To get into UFC's law school, you really have to be on your A game. Like, they choose the best of the best. So the fact that Matthew was able to achieve this feat really meant that he was a very smart and academically proficient person. Before attending university, he had gone to St. Francis High School, and his former classmates had described him as friendly and soft-spoken. He never had anything bad to say about anyone, and no one ever really had anything bad to say about him. He was just a normal guy by all accounts. He lived at home with his parents and sister, and he had a pretty normal relationship with them as well. His dad was a senior police officer on Calgary's police force, so he was an inspector, and he was really, really highly respected by all of his colleagues and just the community around him as well. So on the surface, everything with Matthew seemed to be absolutely fine, you know, like everything seemed to be hunky-dory as far as anyone else was concerned. However, behind closed doors in the Grood household, there were things going on that pointed towards the fact that there might be some sort of issue with Matthew's mental health. 6 years earlier, when Matthew was in grade 11, he had developed a drug problem where he was using a lot of cocaine and ecstasy. He also started listening to a lot of heavy metal music, like almost exclusively really dark heavy metal music. And this really concerned his parents because they felt like he was being antisocial and it was all just really out of character for him. So they put him into counseling, and the counseling actually helped him kick his drug habit, and it helped his music taste change. His sister even said that after that, he went back to being the happy, fun-loving person that he used to be. However, in the weeks leading up to April 15th, things started changing and his antisocial behavior started returning. Tension within the family really started growing. His parents just felt really powerless, and they felt like Matthew was becoming really, really withdrawn, and they felt like nothing that they were doing was getting through to him. He'd also started lashing out at his parents pretty viciously. Like, he was telling them things like how he felt like they were to blame for all of his life's problems and the negative parts of his life, and telling his dad how he felt like he favored his sister over him. And, you know, I can only imagine that those must all be really difficult things for a parent to hear. He'd also started posting increasingly bizarre statuses to Facebook. Some of these statuses his parents actually even made him delete because they felt like they were too creepy. And overall, his peers and his family all felt like these statuses were really just strange, nonsensical, and off-putting. These Facebook statuses range from being dark heavy metal lyrics to ramblings about radical politics and conspiracy theories about the Illuminati, and they just struck anyone who read them as being extremely odd. It just got to a point where everything that his parents tried saying to him was met with animosity and retaliation, and he was just keeping more and more to himself and posting more and more of these statuses to Facebook. On the night of April 15th, Matthew finished his shift at Safeway, which is a grocery store, and made his way over to a house party, which was a post-BSD house party. It's just tradition that after the BSD party on campus, people and their friends will keep the party going by going out to clubs, restaurants, or house parties. And that's what this party was, It was just a continuation of the day's celebrations, and everyone at this party was in really good spirits. Everyone was having a great time. Matthew had been invited by Brandon McCabe. He was the host of the party, and he was one of Matthew's good friends. When Brandon and Matthew first met up that night, Brandon said that, to say the least, Matthew was acting very strange. On their walk over to the house party, Matthew started talking about things like how Barack Obama is the Antichrist, talking about hidden meanings in heavy metal lyrics, and comparing his state of mind to the Matrix movies. He even gave Brandon a clove of garlic, telling him, "You may need it." He'd also been texting his parents that night about things like reincarnation and just more references to conspiracy theories about the Illuminati and Frankenstein and just, things that really worried his parents, to the point where his dad told his mom to call 911 and report him as being potentially suicidal. While his parents were just completely worried sick about him, Matthew got to the party where there was about 25 attendees. Inside the house party, Matthew's strange behavior continued. People noticed him walking around wearing latex gloves, and his jacket was zipped up all the way to his neck. He also went into the backyard where there was a fire pit, threw his phone into the fire pit, and destroyed it. No one had any idea that Matthew was actually in the middle of suffering from a psychotic episode and experiencing extreme delusions. His delusions made him believe that it was the end of the world, that there was a final war going on. It was the good side and the bad side. He was on the good side, and then there was the bad side that was made up of the Illuminati, vampires, werewolves. He thought that this war had started and that people at that party were all of those things. He thought that there were vampires and werewolves there and that it was his duty to kill them. And that was exactly what he did. Matthew Grood stabbed 5 people to death that night with a kitchen knife. 3 of the victims were dead on scene and 2 later died in hospital. The victims were 21-year-old ZACKARIAH Rathwell and 23-year-old Josh Hunter, 2 very good friends who were actually part of the same band, ZACKARIAH and the Prophets, and just 3 days prior to their deaths, they had just released their newest album. There was also 23-year-old KAITLIN PERRAS, and she was described to be very vibrant and just beautiful inside and out. 27-year-old Lawrence Hong, originally from the Philippines and an urban studies student. He was a committed volunteer and just, a shining member of the community. And there was 22-year-old Jordan Segura, a religious studies student who was known for being a very kind and gentle soul. They were all described to be good kids, just full of so much potential with their whole lives ahead of them, and just so loved. The morning after the murders, I remember that it was just all that anyone could talk about. My parents were spam calling me that morning because I'd slept over at one of my friends' house, and they just wanted to make sure that I wasn't at that house party that was all over the news. The community was just devastated. How could a day that was meant to be celebrated just end up in such unimaginable loss? I just cannot even begin to imagine the amount of sheer grief that all of the families involved must have been feeling and still feel to this day. It was just such a sad, sad case. Like, I don't even know how else to describe it. Following the murders, Matthew had psychological evaluations done just so that they could establish where exactly he was at mentally, because obviously mental illness was a factor in there based on the delusions that he was telling investigators about. They needed to make sure that these delusions were genuine and that he wasn't just making them up for the sake of potentially pleading not guilty by reason of insanity and getting away with a lighter sentence. They also had to keep in mind the fact that he had a psychology degree and that there was a chance that he'd be better than the average person at being able to fake being insane. In the end, in 2016, a judge found Matthew to be not criminally responsible for his offenses, and experts unanimously agreed that he was indeed suffering from a genuine psychotic episode during the time of the offenses. During the trial, Matthew Grood did express remorse for his actions, saying that he was truly and deeply sorry for what he'd done, that he took responsibility for their deaths, and that none of the victims deserved to die. But obviously there aren't any words that could ever bring back the victims or heal the wounds on the hearts of the victims' families, and even on the hearts of Matthew's family. So the trial and the verdict never truly gave the victims' families any true closure. But of course, that's completely understandable, and I just really, really hope that over time they are able to start putting the pieces of their life back together and start to find that closure for themselves. Since then, Matthew has been living at a secured psychiatric facility where he's been undergoing strict treatment, and the medical team that works with him have actually very recently said that they strongly believe that his schizophrenia is in remission. In April 2021, Alberta's top court actually approved conditions that are going to allow Matthew to gradually transfer into a monitored group home with his doctor's permission. This decision, of course, was controversial and has had very mixed opinions from the public and the families involved. Canada's justice system does tend to lean more towards rehabilitation sometimes, just like it's done in this case, versus retribution, which some people think is unfair. They believe that Matthew should never ever be given any sort of freedom and that he should stay locked up to truly pay for his crimes, and that if he doesn't and is given these freedoms, it's a slap in the face to the memories of the victims and in the faces of the victims' families. And on the other hand, you have the people who believe that because he wasn't found to be criminally responsible for his offenses, and because he essentially had no control over what he did because of his mental state, that it's unfair to strip him of these freedoms. It's just an insanely morally complex issue. I'm very, very interested to hear where you guys stand on this and what your takes are about it all. The whole rehabilitation versus retribution dilemma has been a very, very controversial topic for years and years. So yeah, please let me know what you guys think. And that is basically the end of the video. I will see you guys next time for another true crime video. So see you soon and take care. Bye.
It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity.